progressivism in any shape, I feel very uncomfortable with people who go to any length like that.
Well, I think people are getting more and more upset at it. And I think as people recognize it's more and more preposterous, they're getting more and more, there's more and more pushback and resistance. What's really interesting with progressivism is that people are getting in trouble now for things that seem like there's something, like Martina Navratilova just got a bunch of shit from people calling her transphobic because she was saying that she didn't think that biological males should be competing with biological females, and that there are people who identify as transgender who keep their penis and compete as a man. And her position was like that, or compete as a woman rather. Her position was like that. Listen, that's not a woman. That's a man, and they have an advantage. And she was citing all these instances, and so she got all this shit from people. So then she said, I'm going to step back and I'm going to research this. So she stepped back and researched it and then came back and said, no, I've looked at all the data now.
She probably came back harder.
She did come back harder.
Yep.
And now they're attacking her and calling her transphobic. Like, listen, this is not transphobia. This is a real thing that you're going to have to address when you're talking about physical activities. When someone identifies. Look, if you want to identify as a woman or identify as a male, I think we should all support people doing whatever they want to do as long as it's not hurting anybody.
Totally agree.
But when you're talking about competition and you're talking about someone identifying, I don't care if you identify as a giraffe. If you compete in an apple picking competition with a giraffe, you're going to fucking lose. You're not a giraffe, stupid, right? This is an extreme version of it, but that's nonsense. That doesn't make any sense. If you decide that you're a woman and you want to enter into a fucking weightlifting competition and you weigh 220 pounds and you're beating all the other women by like fucking insane numbers. Like there was a few world champion weightlifting winners that are women that are actually biologically male. So they're winning weightlifting competitions. Just like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, this is crazy. This is not a matter of whether or not someone should identify with something, but you're talking about making it fair for actual biological women. Like, there's a reason why women don't compete with men. It's because physically they're not as strong. So, and obviously there's some exceptions. There's some weak men, there's some strong women, and there's some sort of a spectrum, and you find yourself somewhere on it. But if you're allowing biological males to compete with biological females and just say, oh, he identifies as a woman, let him in, yay, we're all being very progressive. And then you look at the results and you go, wait, he just broke all the world records first time in? Like, what? And everyone's like, yes, amazing. What a wonderful woman. Girl power. Like, that's not girl power. You're monkeying with biology here. This is crazy.
So what's the road out of that? Like, what does that
People
lead?
getting upset and time being of these instances, enough of these things happen, enough discussion where enough of the actual reality of the facts and the data are shoved in everyone's face enough that the new generation comes to some sort of a rational understanding about what is and is not fair, as opposed to where people are now, where they're just, no matter what, they're scared to not push this progressive agenda, and they're scared of the blowback of Martina Navratilova, who is an LBGT hero, right?
Yes.
She's a fucking hero. She was a lesbian woman who was a world champion tennis player, and now the left are attacking her. So they're eating their own in a spectacular fashion, where you have these trans people who don't want to look at reality, and then people that support the trans people because they don't want to be considered in any way, shape, or form anything other than the most progressive of progressive. And it's nonsense. It's like,
I think you're right, though, in the generational fix to it. I think that's true of a lot of the stuff that, like, one of the things I get asked all the time, school shootings, right? It's like the topic of the day.
Yeah.
I don't have a solution for it. But I know it's not going to be overnight. It'll be generational in nature, just like it crept in generational in nature. I think a lot of these problems, people look for a light switch solution where the solution in and of itself is the exact opposite of that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't see any solution to that either. And I think there's a lot of positions that people feel like they're supposed to take. And if you're on the left, the big position that you're supposed to take is gun control. Get rid of the guns. The guns are the problem. Look at all these people shooting people with guns.
Yep.
Guns, guns, guns. And all the mass shootings, what do they have in common? Guns. They all have guns in common, and they want to take away guns. And then there's the people on the right, and like, you're not gonna, I've never done anything wrong with my gun. You're not taking my fucking gun. And then there's this fucking unstoppable battle between these two sides, and that there's a lot of factors. Like, what happens to a human that leads them to get to this state of mind where they're able to go into a school and shoot it up? Like, what is that? What could possibly be going on? How do we stop that from ever taking place? These people have to be in some sort of insane pain. There has to be something unbelievably wrong with their life that they're capable of doing this. How do we stop that? How do we look at that as like, if this is our global community, if this is our national community, how do we stop this from happening in our national community? I don't know what the answer to that is.
I think there's an answer to stopping school shootings, and not to oversimplify anything. I would say there's a couple key issues. One of them is location. The other one is motivation. You can solve the location issue. Like, if we as a country were legitimately interested in stopping school shootings, how many have ever occurred at a school where the president's children go? 0. Why? Because it's defended, right? They actually take a proactive approach to it. They're going to have layers of security, defense in depth. They're probably going to have somebody looking out the front door, or a system looking out the front door, controlled entry points, entry and exit points. You're going to have a metal detector. You're going to have security staff on site.
Right.
So you can control the location aspect. And I go to every time I'm at my kid's school, or unfortunately or fortunately, every building I've ever been in, I'm viewing it from a pseudo-tactical perspective at least. So I'll go walk around my kid's school, and there's issues that I see from a perspective of somebody who would want to exploit that from an aggressor's perspective. But they could all be solved. But that doesn't solve the second aspect of that, the motivation, because I have absolutely no answer as to why a 17-year-old kid would think that a solution of any kind would be to kill their classmates. I don't understand that at all. And although people, it's funny, like at every shooting, surprisingly enough, there's two things: a gun and a shooter. And vast majority of the time, I hear people talking about the gun.
Yeah.
I think we got to balance that conversation and talk about the motivation.
Yeah, 100%. And then also psych medications. You know, you got to talk about that. The rise in psych medications has got to be correlated with the rise of school shootings. I mean, the amount of people that are on psych medication, and I understand that correlation does not equal causation. Yep. It's not necessarily that the medication's forcing them to do this. But I don't know what study has been done on what is the effect, and is there some sort of a connection other than the fact that they're all on medication? Is there some sort of a connection between taking certain types of psych medication with certain biological makeup that allows you to have this diffusion of reality, like there's just some weird thing happens to them where they're capable of horrific things and horrific actions? Like, how much of that is monkeying with human neurochemistry? I don't know.